Hello, I'm glad you're back to another edition of the Sophie Scholl Society, where we talk about the subjects you're not supposed to talk about in public: religion and politics. That's what Sophie did with her brother and others in the White Rose Society. They were not afraid to bring in theology, good philosophy, and have that translate into political action. They loved their country, Germany. And they did something very daring in delivering this subversive material in the White Rose Society, the 6 leaflets, during the regime when the Nazis were in power. So we want to use our First Amendment as advantageously as we can to advance those ideas of freedom, because that was the heartbeat of Hans and Sophie. Freedom. That's what we're about in America. Freedom. And we have people who see what's going on and alerting us to the troubles that are out there, but also having a conviction to stand. And Deanne has been that kind of individual in our area, the Jamestown community. And she's been an advocate for education. And that advocacy for education is something that you feel very strongly about.
Yes, because our children are being poorly educated. We see that they come out of school, enter college. They're not able to complete college. They're not good at reading. They're not good at comprehending. Their math skills are poor. And especially when I was reading about our founders and the education that they had to learn Greek and Latin. They were not, when they entered college, they were not allowed to speak in English. They had to speak only in Latin. One of our founders, his mother taught him Greek so that he could enter college. They read extremely difficult books, and they used those books and the history in order to write our Constitution. They had to know what happened in history, what was good and what was poor government in history, and they used that information to write our Constitution. And we don't see that occurring in our colleges. Our colleges now are despicable in coddling snowflakes. It's just, it makes one weep, actually. I'm laughing right now, but it makes one weep to think about what's happened to our American institutions.
Yeah, do you have your kids come home and talk to you in Greek and Latin? Think about what our founders did when they were being educated. They could speak fluently.
Yes, they could.
In those languages. And today, we're having trouble with kids merely speaking English.
Yes. They don't speak grammar well, and they don't write. They have not learned how to write. Of course, writing is difficult. It's difficult to teach, but there are programs available that help teachers with this, just as there are programs that help them with teaching children how to read properly. And this is what I have been trying for a number of years. I've actually been doing this more than a quarter century now. I was figuring out, trying to get Jamestown to upgrade what it's doing in education. There are programs in the public domain that are very strong, have been very effective, and are for the type of children that we see here. Low income, welfare children, poverty children. They're programs for this type of children that have been very successful, but getting people to open their minds to this has been a difficult task.
And you experienced that difficulty on a school board.
Yes, I did. I thought that I was a jewel, but I wasn't to them. In fact, they did everything possible to thwart anything that I brought up or wanted to do, and that was very dismaying to me.
So you felt that opposition not only from the state. I mean, it's difficult to get things by the state, but right in the local school board itself, you felt very stifled.
Yes, I read all the IEPs, the individual education plans for disabled children, that would appear before the board. The board was just rubber stamping everything, but I read all of these, and I wrote a report for the board showing how many children had been misclassified or were not in need of special education. When good programs are instituted in a school, the number of children going into special education decreases. But some schools like children in special education because, of course, they get more money for them. But I showed how we could improve what was happening in our schools, but there was like a collusion against this. The superintendent and the other board members were all in one camp, and I was in another camp, so that was quite difficult.
Now, you mentioned good programs. What would be an example of a good program to help those students you specifically had in mind?
Well, I was talking to them about direct instruction programs because these have been in the public domain for now some 50 years. They were created by Siegfried Engelmann, and they were specifically for minority children, poor children, and he showed how they could do whatever they needed to do when they learned well and when the program was set up well. So he wrote programs for reading, for math. I'm using one right now to tutor my grade 6 granddaughter. It's a pre-algebra program, and we just go step by step, and she's doing great with this.
And she's probably doing better than the rest of her students at her own grade level.
Yes, this is actually above her grade level. So this would be something, this is a program actually for students who have had poor luck in math, who have not done well in math, but this fulfills the requirement to get them to graduate. So it is a very powerful program.
You mentioned direct instruction. Is that consistent with Common Core?
No, it is quite the opposite of Common Core. Of course, Common Core was foisted upon us by the Obama administration, and many states went with this program, our state included, and they wrote standards for the Common Core, which are still in place today, woefully. So we don't seem to have people who are very smart about what they're doing who are in the state education department.
Obama administration, that's federal government.
Yes.
Federal and government imposing its education plan when education is not even mentioned in the Constitution.
Right.
Which tells us the Obama administration really wasn't interested in freedom or following the Constitution.
No.
They had a philosophy that was working in them that countered
Yes.
our Constitution and intent of our nation.
Yes. But even today, we're seeing something that I don't like to see, and that's all this emphasis. Although you and I wanted to start a charter school in Jamestown, I think we would have been successful with that. But the charter schools, they're starting all over the country, and they're not supporting the public schools. Public schools need to be supported. And many of these charter schools now are failing. They're not doing any better than the public schools are doing. And one of the reasons is that those who enter the field of education have lower SAT scores than in other professions, especially for elementary education. They're among the very lowest of the SAT scores going on to college.
So you're basically drawing from the same pool of teachers that you see in public education.
Yes.
And are they using the same curriculum as well, Common Core curriculum, or haven't you been able to ascertain exactly what's going on in the schools there?
I think various schools are using various different things. The ones that are most successful are the classic schools, those that are producing a classic curriculum where they do a lot of reading and a lot of writing and learn to speak properly.
Hang with me, Deanne. I think we're going to do one more show after this because this aspect of education needs to be examined, studied, because without education, we are not going to be the free people our founders intended us to be. Join us next time for the Sophie Scholl Society.